Morning, ladies and gentlemen. How are you this morning? This has been great. I only got to come in about 2 o'clock this morning, so he's right, the roads are bad. Be very careful going home. Now, I have the distinct challenge of being the last speaker, which means most of you either want to get out into the nice weather and enjoy Banff or go home for the weekend, and that's never a good position to be in. But I'm going to make sure that you're energized. We're going to talk a lot about some exciting stuff, and I'm going to go really fast. So pay attention because there is a lot to talk about in the space of 1 hour, okay? Now, most of you know me from the presentation I've always done, 13 Ways to Kill Your Community. It's about attitudes and how it sabotages our success, right? That's always seemed to me to be a challenge. We all know what to do. We sometimes, though, wind up undermining our own success by our attitudes. And then it struck me over the last few years of working on this that there are so many communities that adopt some particular attitudes that sabotage their own success. Not adhering to change, living in the past, being resistant to anything new that comes up. There's several of those chapters in the book. And so I started to work on a presentation that talked about the need to adapt to change, and that's what this is. Okay? So it's not 13 Ways to Kill Your Community. If you've heard it and you're thinking, oh, I don't want to hear this guy again, this is new. All right. So look, resisting change. Everything is about to change. Now, I had this friend. He thought he was a comedian. One time, he bought something. You know when we used to still get change back, money? And he bought something and he said, no thanks, I fear change. And he thought he was hilarious. And then he used the same joke for the next 20 some odd years. Nobody laughed anymore, but he thought it was still great because he got one round of applause. But we are afraid of change. As a society, as individuals, we do fear change constantly. And that's a challenge because everything is going to change. Politics, education, healthcare, communities, infrastructure, policing. I mean, the whole list is up there. And that doesn't even start to break down some of the barriers on what is coming and what's going to change. The issue is not what's going to change. The issue is why do we resist change so vigorously? Well, I did some exploring, and I talked to some engineering friends of mine. We were having a beer, hanging out and talking, and I said, why? Talk to me about change. And they said, oh, Doug, we break change up into two groups. Incremental change, when something already exists, and then it starts it just nuanced changes to it. It's incremental change, and we have no problem with that. Design change is when something brand new is invented, and we've never seen it before, and it revolutionizes the way we live. I thought, okay, that's interesting. But we're not all engineers. But then there was a trigger for me that people still think about incremental change and design change. They just don't understand it. And that incremental change is when things change just a little bit and we accept it, no problem. But when design change comes along, a wholesale change in the way we live and the way we evaluate the world, we become resistant to it. I'll show you some examples. So first, the cell phone. Do you remember? It's hard to see this picture, but this was Murtaugh. He was on the movie Lethal Weapon. And this was the first cell phone that appeared in a movie. It sat on top of a car battery. That's how big it was. I think they hired him as an actor because he's the only guy big enough to lift it. Right? And people were just in awe of these new cell phones. Lots of people said, oh, this will never work and they'll never reach the common person. But then this came along, and when I was first elected 16 years ago as an MLA, StarTAC phone. This revolutionized the cellular phone industry. I mean, this was cutting edge 16 years ago. And when they gave it to me, I thought, oh, this is just like Star Trek, right? Flip it open, beam me up, Scotty, right? This was cool. This stored 10 phone numbers. No names, just 10 phone numbers. That's 16 years ago. And now, this is the new prototype for a cell phone. Bendable screen that goes around your wrist. And there's more technology in it than all of the space missions, the missions to the moon or the space shuttle combined. It's incredible what's coming. And this is what's next. How about computers? This is a picture of one of the first computers made when they had the vacuum tubes and they used to do programming, and it was a room about half this size, and it was just doing addition. And people said, oh, you know what? Actually, one of the inventors of this, when asked, computers, how do you think they'll grow? And he said, I think the whole world will need a maximum of 5. Right? Now, the reason I'm showing you these is because change is not just about resisting change. Change is the problems we have is when we ignore change or we deny it exists. And we did all the time. I mean, I still know a guy who, now he just says it jokingly, but 10 years ago, he still said computers are a fad. They'll never catch on. And then they went to this. desktop computers. Then they went to this where you don't even have to have the tower anymore. It's all built into the screen. Everyone has one. The average number of computers in a home now is 3, not 5 in the world. And this is the future computer. The integration, the intersection of technology with your cell phone and your computer, this is it. But it's not just with those. Look at vehicles today. I ask my engineering friends, same one I have a beer with often, not that often, often enough. Often, okay, it's like you know me. And I asked them to define a vehicle. They said, well, this would be the definition. It's not powered by humans, so it's powered by something else, and it has wheels. That's the simplest definition you can get. So a horse and buggy was a vehicle. Well, people, because they resist change or ignore change or deny change or don't even understand what's changing and how it's coming at them, Henry Ford, his famous quote, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Right? And it would have been the same with computers and cell phones. They don't know what's coming. Yet, look at this. This is a picture in 1900 on Fifth Avenue in New York City. The circle represents the only vehicle, the car, in that picture. The rest are horse and buggies. Now, everyone said, we want faster horses. The vehicles will never catch on. This is a picture of the same street 13 years later. Every single vehicle there is a Model T, except for one. It's circled. It's a horse and buggy. It took 13 years for a population that said the vehicle will never catch on, we want faster horses, to adopt vehicles. And of course, that's changed dramatically because this is the new vehicle. That's a Tesla. And I mean, think about it. The average vehicle now has 250 moving parts in a combustion engine, just over 200, sometimes 250. The average electric motor has 3 to 5 moving parts. This is not a vehicle by our current definitions. This is an operating system on wheels. It's a computer. Oh, and I'll back up. I leave that picture of the watch up because those two technologies will interact so that you walk into a vehicle someday and sit down and it will look at me and go, so Doug, where are we going today? Can I bring up the news? Would you like a cold beer? Because you don't drive, right? It's autonomous. The world's going to change dramatically. Now, that's technology, and it makes it very obvious intermittent change and design change, right? Incremental change and design change. But the reason why I'm telling you this is because we do oppose things that are dramatically different than we've had in the past. And this may make sense to you, but see how impactful it is when we try and get society to change and why it's difficult for people to adapt to change. Marriage and families. So this was the 1950s family. Leave it to Beaver, right? The $1 million family, it was called a mom and a dad and a son and a daughter. It was perfect on TV, because I don't know that this ever really existed. It was not that common. And then things changed. Incrementally, your design, it's your perspective. But now we have interracial marriages and interracial families. And there are people, whether you like it or not, that say, no, this is not right. This is not what marriage should be. We call them racist or prejudiced. But to them, this is a design change on something that was fundamental to the way they looked at the world. Not an incremental change. To those who accept it, they say, it's no big deal. It's just a little change, if that. And then things are changing more. Now we have same-sex couples getting married. And there are still people out there that say, no, that's changing the definition of marriage. The reason why they're opposed is because they see it's a whole design change, not an incremental change. And now you've got same-sex couples adopting kids and same-sex couples adopting kids from different races. And every step, there are resistors who say, no, you're changing things too much. We have a tendency to resist, deny, or ignore change to our own detriment. And look, this is what happens in our communities when you're trying to adapt new technology or adapt to change. You've got 5 groups of people, and if you've heard me talk before, you heard me talk about them. They're the NIMBYs. Not in my backyard. Go ahead and do it. I understand why you need to. Just don't do it to me. And then there are the bananas. Build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. And they are more resistant to change. They think it's a bad thing and don't want it anywhere in their community. And then there are the nopes, not on planet Earth. And this becomes a religious paradigm where it doesn't matter what the facts are, what you're trying to do. It's about their faith that it's wrong to do, even though it may have absolutely nothing to do with anything except they're resistant to change. And then you've got the caves. citizens against virtually everything. They're not just resistant to physical change in the environment, they don't want anything to change ever, which unfortunately it does. And then you've got the newest group, fears, fire up everyone against reasonable solutions. Those are the people that aren't just happy telling you they're unhappy with things, they will actually make sure everyone else in the room is also unhappy. And they do it by spreading fear, so that everyone is afraid of leadership and the change that's coming. And it's not based on facts, it's based on propagating fear. They are the groups that are fighting any change that comes to our communities. And that's bad, because our communities will suffer if we don't adapt to change. I mean, look, anti-change cultures die. Blockbuster, they actually were offered the opportunity by the founder and CEO of Netflix to buy them for $50 million. And Blockbuster said, no, thanks. Mailing out CDs, and now you're moving to online, that's never going to catch on. Blockbuster is now gone, and Netflix, I think, is worth $130 billion. You've got RCA. They never saw the new technology coming from Korea and from Japan. They didn't adapt to it, and now RCA still exists. They're not defunct, but you need a magnifying glass to read the name RCA on the